So we now have all the panelists and the discussant, reflection, everyone is sitting here. We are a little bit behind time, but I think it's time well spent, from our speakers. And we are now right away moving into Q&A. So, you've heard a lot of things now over the last hour or so. So please raise your hand, introduce who you are, and, please give us any questions, really any questions that you might have, I think. Go ahead. So plus raise your hand. We have someone with a mic. They'll come to you. Or maybe let's see, are there any questions about yield improvement? Yes, okay, we have a question right here.
I'm Stanley Huang from USDA's Economic Research Service. So I do have a question for Mark. Since you have been working at the IFPRI for so long, so I'm interested in what's your answer or response to today's topic, where we need to go for yield improvement.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Who else? Anyone else? Yeah, so there's a question in the back, the middle of the room here.
Hi, I'm Randy Brummett from the World Bank. We heard a lot about the technologies and the market access and stuff. Nobody said anything about some of the structural constraints to yield improvement, things like field size, about labor costs and availability. Good. I'd be interested to hear how some of that fits in with the other technologies and constraints.
Okay, great. Any other question? Yes, here on the left.
Hi, Emmy Simmons from CSIS and the Global Panel on Agriculture and Food Systems for Nutrition. And my question is actually that I haven't heard the word food systems or the phrase food systems mentioned, even though people have talked about increasing yields and improving nutritional quality. There's a whole lot of people and steps in between, and I think you've all referred a little bit to markets, but it kind of ties back to the last question. Are we, as a global food market, really structured to both provide incentives for yield improvement and greater sustainability, as well as to increase the availability and the cost, the access to good nutrition and healthy foods?
Okay, great. So if there's no other quick question, then we'll hand back. Oh, sorry, one more here, and then we'll hand back to the audience for a first round of response.
Thank you, Rajul Pandialuch. Mark, I cannot resist asking you this question because you're leaving before 2020. All those projections you've done, are we on track to meet those projections, or where are we in that picture?
Okay, yeah, great. So I guess we will start with Mark answering, and then everyone else who wants to come in from the panelists on the structural constraints and the term food system. Please, Mark.
Raju, why do you think I'm leaving now and not in 2020? but actually, interestingly, we ought to do a retrospective. And what's tended to happen is that the longer-term projections we made then were slightly optimistic in the medium one, but the pessimistic scenarios were a little closer, the very earlier ones. But then we actually, some colleagues here did a review of our work on the livestock revolution, and they showed that this was written about 2002 or 3, and they show we hit the mark quite well as of 2015 on most livestock products at a regional basis. So of course, the other thing is you're really not after complete accuracy, and so what you'd really like to do is falsify bad results. You'd like to show, for example, if there's going to be shortages or food prices are going up, you'd like to be able, you do that kind of work to induce greater investments. So you almost want to falsify your results in some ways, but it's gone pretty well. So let's see. Yeah, that's a tough question here. I think I'm really still in the camp that very high technology is going to be needed in the coming years, so that we are going to have to try to be sure, for example, that gene editing is not over-regulated the way probably the GMOs have been to open up those kinds of potentials. But then I think we're also facing, so outside the pure agriculture sector, and this somewhat reflects on some of what Emmy was saying, that we need to, innovations outside of agriculture are going to have profound implications for agriculture in coming years. And that includes, for example, robotics, the rapid advance of satellite-based observation, and sensors that allow you to, for example, to track goods all the way from the farm through cold storage and onward. And I think what I'm hoping is that developing countries will be able to adopt or adapt those rapidly so as to be able to, in a sense, upgrade and improve the quality throughout the value chains. And the fact that they're not going to sort of fall behind, even farther behind developed countries. And there's some evidence that you can get smaller scale versions of those kinds of things, smaller scale precision agriculture, for example. But there could also be pressures to really, for economies of scale, to push farmers to larger sizes sooner than they should be. I actually think one person mentioned farm size. I think that in the future there is going to be a rapid increase in farm size in most of the developing world because of the economies of scale of these technologies. But we hope that it isn't so fast that people are pushed off the land fast enough. So I think there's a whole lot of technological disruption coming, not only in yields, but through the whole farming system.
Okay, great. So now we have the structural questions, labor, farm size, and the term food system. Who wants to? Jim, okay, great.
Just on the food systems, one lesson is for government policy is don't mess things up. For example, what's happened in the Philippines, which still has the NFA, a National Food Authority, which monopolizes trade. As a result, the marketing margins in the Philippines are 3 times those in Thailand, where the market has evolved under very similar transportation distance system. On food systems, again, the supermarket revolution, which is an incredibly complex system of transforming product over space, time, and form, evolved largely outside the grain fundamentalism. So there's another example of how the government policy didn't really anticipate that. I mean, what you can do is work on the infrastructure, as Prabhu said, to reduce transaction costs to accelerate that evolution.
Yeah, and we have Jim also coming in on that.
Yes, I wanted to comment on the food systems again. One of the last things I did before coming to the National Science Foundation at the University of Florida was help convince our administrators to establish an Institute for Sustainable Food Systems. And I did that after seeing an awful lot of food systems research going on in Europe and very little going on here. So this is on the research side of things, but I do think that we've been behind maybe in the U.S. at least, and we are seeing some places like the University of Florida and other places show stronger interest in looking at the whole food chain and food systems as opposed to only the productivity side of things. And I do think that institutions like IFPRI has a strong role to play there because you already deal with some of these complex issues like that. One other thing, one final thing I would say is that at the National Science Foundation, we also recognize the importance of systems approaches and modeling and interconnected things. And one of the programs that I co-direct, is called INFUSE, the Innovations at the Nexus of Food, Energy, and Water Nexus Systems. And so a lot of the proposals that are coming in there are also starting to deal with some of the complexities of food systems from non-traditional agricultural researchers. So I think that I agree with the concern that there hasn't been that much so far, but also wanted to support the idea of moving forward with that.
Okay, great. Is there anyone on the left on labor, farm size? Jikun? and then we'll go back to the audience.
I think on structural constraint, including farmer side, it's changing quite a lot when you developing from when you agricultural economy transforming from low state to higher state. Like in China case, before wage increasing, of course, the technology, marketing, institution are very important to help facilitating a cultural transformation from grain economy to diversification to high value commodity. When we move into, when wage increasing, then mechanization, institution for non-rental market, institution for people migrate to urban area, they play very important. But and the major point here is, over different states of rural transformation, there are different short constraint. We need a different policy to deal with that. As Jim earlier said, there's a sequence of institutions, sequence of policies to facilitate the transformation, to overcoming this constraint, because they're different in different states of transformation.
Okay, great. So yeah, we go back to the audience one last time, and then also online if there are questions. So this is your last chance. Okay, we have Keith. Wow, okay. I'm not sure if I can take all, but we start Keith here, and then we slowly move backwards, I guess. Yeah. So quick questions, please.
I'm Keith Wiebe, fortunate to work for Mark for the past 4 years at IFPRI. What a great panel. My question has to do with scientific analysis and the attitudes toward that today, and your own views on the success of evidence-based analysis to inform policy during the course of your own careers and how you see that going in the future.
Okay, great. Next one. You choose, just whoever is close to the mic. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Dan Silverstein. I'm a private sector advisor. Saharah, can you talk for a minute about the intersection between community seed banks and botanical gardens, how they may stimulate each other's operations?
Mm-hmm. Further back. Oh yeah, good. We have more mics. Great. Okay.
Hi, howdy boos from the Harvest Plus division, I guess. Mark, I really enjoyed your going through the career and the changes at IFPRI and what IFPRI was like in the beginning. I'm not as old as you, of course, so you have a better perspective than I do. But I think that, the John Mellor era really established our academic credentials, and you pointed out how PAIR brought in communications. And I think the third big change at IFPRI has been the decentralization. So maybe you can comment about that and your perspectives on the decentralization.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. What else? Okay, Suresh has the mic, and then we'll go
Suresh
to
Babu from IFPRI. Starting with Prabhu Pingali, the time has been ripe for market-oriented agriculture development for a long time, but it has not happened because of the political economy issues. We didn't hear anything about that. I just want anyone to comment. On the food system thing, we are talking about food systems, but then we started with farming systems 25 years ago, and then moved to integrated farming systems, livelihoods, and now farming systems and resilient farming systems. And we have been changing our concepts, but the countries are trying to catch up with it. And we are still not having enough capacity or institutions to catch up on the farming systems work that we started 25 years ago. Any comments on that?
Yeah, there's certainly dynamics in terms of terminology over the years. So there was definitely one in the back that we still want to get.
Thank you very much. Peter Matlin, Cornell University. Mark, I can't believe you're leaving. You have been an absolute giant in the field. Thank you very much for all of your work. Question I'd like to ask in terms of yield improvement, bringing us back to the focus topic, are there technology and policy trade-offs between aggregate yield improvement and issues of equity? When you're dealing with farm size differences, when you're dealing with differences in farmers that have different risk averse and different levels of capitalization, what needs to be done to achieve sort of the optimal balance of yield improvement to feed the growing cities, but at the same time improving the welfare of resource-poor farmers? Thank you.
Great question. I don't know if there's an urgent last one. If not, then do we have anything online? A specific question. Good. Do you need a mic? It's coming.
Thank you. There seem to be very specific questions. So there's like at least 2 of them. You want them?
I mean, okay, just give them to us and we decide if you answer.
Okay. How can we improve the seeds for the traditional farmers? Which mechanisms are we using? Can we introduce seeds for food security to drought-affected households in Somalia?
Somalia, okay.
The other one is, what is the progress on the initiative called Experience Breeding Platform? I have seen this initiative as a real opportunity to vigorize the national program breeding.
Okay.
And there's a third one, very specific for Mark Rosgrant, apparently regarding the impact evaluation system and whether errors were being fixed for that particular thing.
Okay, that's an interesting one.
That's it.
Okay, good. So we'll have to go to a very quick round of responses, and I'll basically start with Stan, go down. Anyone who can respond to any of those many very interesting questions. I really like the technology equity one. And then we'll come to our concluding remarks as well. So please, Stan.
So the answer was about sitting where I now sit is the problem of too much and diverging information to know how to weight different analysis. So you can get an analysis from IFPRI, analysis and something else, get 3 analyses from IFPRI, could all say maybe different things. I mean, it's true, it happens. So, the technical capacity within our organization is not sufficient to be able to utilize that information. So what is the service that nobody yet provides which tries to keep active sort of portfolio reviews across these things and blends this information together? Because it's very complicated to try to work with that. The other one is this question about sort of going for growth versus the trade-off question is also something that's being reflected in an internal discussion. Let's take the Mallorean view, the presentation you had here with John Meller, which is about the small commercial farmers. This had a lot of receptivity within the team. We had a memo sorry, this is maybe too much information, to the co-chairs, and one of the co-chairs wrote back and said, so what's happening to the subsistence? So what are the incomes and the subsistence farmers when we see that the commercial farmers are driving forward and producing the surplus and getting these income multipliers, where is the balance? And so it's coming back to say we need a more divergent set of interventions and sequencing, which brings me to a plug for Peter Hazel's work, he's gone already, which was presented in the Agri report, which was around some more sort of segmentation of that smallholder landscape and different types of interventions and different sequencing that would address those different constraints maybe. So,
okay, thanks. Jikun?
Address some issue on small farm technology and equity, those issues. I think I want focus 2 points. First, we really need a good attention system. That attention system include technology, price information for small farmers because they have difficult to access to this kind of thing compared to larger farmers. Second, if we ask small farmer, besides technology, what you need, they will tell you, I don't know where to sell in my product. They can produce some product, but they don't know how to sell product and sell at a higher price. So we need a much better marketing infrastructure for small farmer. They can link with the global, domestic and global market. That, in this sense, wholesale market in the rural area is very, very important.
Okay, great. Mark?
Yeah, I'll just address a couple of the sort of direct ones. The question about errors is actually a very important question because any large modeling system will have errors. It'll have assumptions that may be appropriate at a given point in time, but with better data available and better knowledge need to be updated and fixed. And it is a constant effort to identify issues within the model, to identify how those might be affecting the results, and then updating and improving it. So that's something that all modelers have to do all the time, and has been a very important part of what we try to do. The decentralization, there were kind of two types of decentralization at IFPRI. One was since the internal management decentralization, where at the beginning, it was completely flat structure with basically everybody reporting to John Meller at the beginning, because we were so small that tended to work. As we got larger, we organized what were called research programs, which had a little authority, but not that much. Then later on, we evolved into the division, research division structure that we have now. And that actually devolved a large amount of authority and responsibility to the individual division directors and the staff of those divisions. And I think that's actually been one of the keys to IFPRI's success, that you have highly motivated people who are experts in the area in which they're working, who are responsible for making sure that that group works. And then the Director General oversees that process, but gives a lot of freedom to the division directors as well. I think that's served us very well. The other key decentralization, maybe what you were referring to, Howdy, is the decentralization to regional offices and country offices around the world. I think that was an absolutely essential thing that IFPRI did. It started, I mean, we've had some offices and programs for years in different developing countries, but it's really with the establishment of development strategies and governance division by when Peter, I think, was Per or Joachim was already here? Was it already? That was Joachim at that point. And then when Schengen then took over the development strategies division and then later became Director General, he expanded that tremendously. And I think you'd argue that that has helped maintain a lot of our funding base and made us much more relevant and impactful in the country. So that was an extremely important thing to the future of IFPRI.
Great. So any quick remarks on any of these questions? So Jim?
Yeah, in the political economy, the economist's answer is transparency. Sometimes it works. So in the Philippines, there was a horrible 18% tax, which we pointed out made the farm prices low and made consumer prices high. And it was actually reformed and part of the white paper that helped to get rid of Marcos. Sometimes it doesn't work. The National Food Authority is an extremely attractive way of paying off your cronies and political supporters and giving direct bribes to people who arrange government sales. So decades of ag economists have pointed out what's wrong with it, and it's still there. Sometimes, unfortunately, ideology is the enemy. In the case of Philippine land reform program, the land market is frozen, and there's huge amounts of fallow land in order to avoid the land reform program. And that's partly at the feet of certain analysts at the World Bank and elsewhere that supported the ideology, but of course, in implementation, it looks very different.
Okay, great. Any last very quick point?
Just very
Morven,
quickly,
would like to make one
Keith's
quick
question about evidence-based analysis and the role it's had in our careers and on impacting policy. And actually, if you look at agricultural biotechnology and the research that's been done, we have spent hundreds of millions of dollars accruing a tremendous amount of scientific evidence, and it has had almost no impact on policy. So it was a situation where we could not science our way out of the challenges that have been addressed. And I think there's really important learnings in there when we're looking at establishing policy, and it really comes back to what Emmy commented about in terms of food systems, and maybe not including actors in the food systems at the onset of the evolution of that specific area.
Thank you very much.